There's 150 or many more to see. There is over 1,000 Pokemon now, here in Generation 9. I didn't think they'd do it. I thought they'd save the number for Generation 10, but there are now over 1,000 Pokemon.
Over 150?
Yeah, you can say that again, Ash. Over 150 or more to see. To be a Pokemon master is my destiny. There is now over 1,000 different species of Pokemon, and I'm genuinely kind of a little bit shocked. I didn't think they would do this until Generation 10 on the, what I assume to be the 30th anniversary release of Pokemon. This is, of course, Gen 9, and 9 is a hard number to market, so why bother with the 1,000 Pokemon now when we can hit that milestone and make a big deal out of it later? I'm genuinely kind of surprised that they did it, but they did. We now have over 1,000 species of Pokemon. Although, that said, and by the way, I'm obviously about to spoil some late game Pokemon for Scarlet and Violet here, so like click away. I'm gonna give you a couple little seconds and then we're gonna make sure that we get into, because we need to talk about these Pokemon there. Okay, you ready? Good. All right. There are like 16 Pokemon that are what you would call paradox Pokemon. These are past and future variants of pre-existing Pokemon, and so whether they're considered forms or completely separate, they have their own dex entries separate of the Pokemon obviously in the game. But I wonder when it comes to Pokemon Home, when these Pokemon are integrated, will these count towards that 1,000 Pokemon total? If they don't, I think that puts us at like 992, I think, or thereabouts. Someone will do the maths at some point. Which means we could probably hit 999 or 1,000 in the DLC. And I guess that's what I want to talk about here, is I think that will be the case. I think when these Pokemon hit Pokemon Home, they will actually reduce the number of Pokemon in the Pokedex. That these Pokemon will become forms, and so we won't go over that 1,000 mark. It's still technically speculation as to whether they are separate Pokemon or not. Speculation that may be resolved throughout some story beats to do with what we assume is going to be the DLC of upcoming Scarlet and Violet. If that's the case, then I would expect the first Pokemon of Generation 10 or the final Pokemon of this generation, whether it's a mythical or a DLC or a Legendsmon or whatever in the future, that to be Pokemon number 1,000. It could be a really interesting point for the series as a whole as well. A chance for Pokemon to reboot or do something new or do something different. The last, I guess, big milestone after 151 would be 500, and Pokemon 500 was reached during the Unova arc. In fact, Pokemon number 500 is Emboar, so really early on. It's like the 6th Pokemon in the Unova Pokedex. And Pokemon Black and White was a sort of point of reboot for the franchise. It was a point when they felt that there were a lot of Pokemon coming up, and actually, Generations 1 to 4 are a relatively consistent package, with Generation 5 being a soft reboot, with many of the Pokemon appearing in that generation to be spiritual successors to pre-existing Pokemon. You've got Gigalith, which is like the new version of Golem, or Conkeldurr, which is the new version of Machamp, or Seismitoad, which is the new version of Politoed, Sork and Throw, which are Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee. There was a lot of Gen 1 that reappeared in Generation 5 as Pokemon as a whole kept growing bigger and bigger and bigger. Previous Pokemon lost their place, their sense of identity as the Rock Golem Pokemon or the Frog Water Pokemon. With over 1,000 Pokemon now, I do wonder where the franchise is gonna go in the future. Is there a stopping point for this? Is there a Generation 15 where we hit 1,510 Pokemon, 10 times what we originally had in Generation 1? Is there a point where we start to, given the results of like Dexit and having to produce games with less Pokemon in to try and account for the quality of the game and make sure the quality is going to be good, is there a point where we just say, no, we need to be even more selective with the Pokemon that end up in the game? Games like Pokemon Legends Arceus or Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee that just have a much smaller Pokedex genuinely don't bother me. Pokemon Colosseum is one of my favorite Pokemon games of all time, and it's a game that really doesn't feature that many Pokemon in the actual games, and obviously all of the Pokemon are programmed into the games. But if they weren't, it wouldn't have fully ruined my enjoyment of the games either. I do wonder as we approach the actual kind of 1,000 mark, and I mean, we're already well over when you consider all the different forms and variations of Pokemon. I do wonder how that's going to play into the franchise going forward, especially as we come towards that 30th anniversary in just 4 years' time. In 2026, this series is going to be 30 years old, and this is very much the point where we're now at that 1,000 mark, where Pokemon has to decide what it's going to be for the next 30 years, the next 30 to 50. Is it going to be a game that continues to release generation after generation, re-releasing a brand new rock golem Pokemon every single generation that's just slightly different, which we've now got with the Nacli evolution line? Or is it going to be something that takes this wide roster of characters, these new generations, and starts to only really drip feed in new characters and new Pokemon very, very selectively, like the Legends Arceus games, that takes a whole different approach? Pokemon is a game, and especially with this generation, with the graphical issues that come with it, that has faced a lot of criticism over its last couple of generations of exactly how game production is being handled. If there was a point for change in the series, I think it will be something that we see over these next 4 to 5 years, and I think going into the 30th anniversary, it might even be the last big opportunity that Pokemon has to pivot into trying something new, to re-establishing what the next 10 years or 20 years are going to look like. 1,000 Pokemon is not just some symbolic number. 1,000 Pokemon is a big deal. It's a point where 151, if that felt like a lot, we're now into the 4 digits. Pokemon is a big money-making franchise, and it makes its money very often based on these characters and based on pumping out and creating more of these characters. The question comes up, what are they gonna do in like 30 years? Will there be 2,000 Pokemon? Is that future even possible? Or while another generation is possible, is this 3-year cycle really sustainable? Is it something that they now want to slow down on and take the 1,000 designs that they've got and re-implement them into specific ways and specific new games? Games like Legends Arceus that just deal with these 4 generations of Pokemon and a couple of others that appear in Legends Arceus. Maybe they want to do other games that just take the Pokemon of Unova and Johto and stitch them together, or just the Pokemon of Kanto and Alola and stitch them together. Could they tell new, different, interesting stories, or will they keep on releasing the same cycle of games? I can't help but feel that a lot of the audience that really is in love with Pokemon, that grew up with Pokemon, the people my age, the people like you who are watching, who are maybe, and I mean statistically speaking, in your mid-20s, maybe you're in your 30s, maybe you're a teenager, but you grew up with Pokemon. Are you going to be able to keep up with over 1,000 Pokemon and want to continue to buy in generation after generation? I guess these are questions I'm more asking myself. But I think 1,000 is a very big and important number for the Pokemon franchise, and I do wonder if it's time for them to slow down in creating new Pokemon, as much as I absolutely love to see new Pokemon, and start telling new stories with the creatures that they do have. This is just a little thought, a little ramble. I wanted to do something for this kind of 1,000 Pokemon mark. Whether we've actually hit it or not, I guess we won't properly know till Pokemon Home is out and the national dex is kind of updated and we know what these Paradox Pokemon are. And maybe they really will slide past 1,000 without any kind of symbolic recognition, but that would feel wrong, I think. But that's just my thoughts. Let me know what you're thinking in the comment section down below. And of course, so hi, Pokemon Masters.
This is Ash Ketchum. You just watched a video by Birdkeeper Toby. That makes you a Pokemon Master!
Thank you so much to those of you supporting me on Patreon, allowing me to put out as many videos as I have lately, including the big patrons of this month, Anthony Lee, El Gator, Charmander Aznable, and Jedruben. Thank you.